talking about mess. So South Korea, all right. We thought he's going to resign, but he
Mm,
hasn't. And then they also failed impeachment. I think, two votes short of the impeachment.
mm,
But what's strange is that his own party, on the one hand, his own party seems abandon him. They said they want him to go. But then they're saying, okay, not immediately, not right now. They kind of like put everything on hold. They are saying the ruling party. I mean, they're not really ruling because they have the minority in the parliament, but they are the party of the president. So they're saying we took over the power from him, which is unconstitutional. I think you can't do that. But
mm.
anyway, so what is your take on the situation now in South Korea?
Well, what is absolutely clear to me is that there's been lots of discussions and conversations behind the scenes between the ruling, let's call them the ruling party. I agree they're not the ruling party, but they are the effective power. The ruling party, the deep state in South Korea, which we talked about last time, the United States, all of them, they're absolutely horrified by the failure of this coup attempt. They're very, very worried that if the president falls, if there's new elections, if a new president comes in, this person will start to revisit all of the policies that the current president has been associated with. The alliance with Japan, which we talked about
Mhm.
in our last program, the hostility to China, which South Korean people are not enthusiastic about, the backing for Ukraine, which South Korean people are also not enthusiastic about. They might even conceivably, as they have said, the opposition has said, start reaching out to North Korea again.
Mhm.
So this must be prevented at all costs. So even though the president is completely discredited and without support, we keep him there, not really because we support him anymore, but simply in order to prevent the opposition from getting their own people in place to take over from him. So that simply prolongs the crisis. It creates instability in South Korea. It ignores the future and the condition of the South Korean people. It probably will result in economic problems because when this sort of thing happens in a country, economic problems usually follow. But that's what it probably will do. And by the way, just to add quickly, sanctions probably play a significant part in this. Obviously, the anti-Russian sanctions, of which South Korea is a part, that's one thing. But far more important, the restrictions that the South Koreans, under the current president, have agreed to in terms of supplying advanced chips and that
Mhm.
kind of thing to China. We can't have them doing that, so we try and stop them re-establishing their good relations with China. So this is what it's all about. Again, sacrificing the interests of South Korea, of the Korean people, all of the Korean people, North and South, by the way, who need peace, is sacrificing all of that again to the greater geopolitical interest, which is this confrontation with China, which is what has to take priority over all else. As I've said in many programs,
Yeah.
always at the back of it, um, China for the West is the big thing.
Mhm. Now, in your program, you talked about your own theory, why this happened right now. Can you
Yeah.
explain that too? I think it's a very
Yeah,
interesting
absolutely.
theory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the single event that provoked it is, of course, the Biden administration is now in its last days. It's been
Mhm.
trying to find weapons to send to Ukraine. It can't find weapons in the
Mhm.
United States to send to Ukraine because its own arsenals are now heavily depleted. The Europeans have failed to
Mhm.
produce their own weapons in sufficient quantity. South Korea has lots and lots and lots of weapons. So the idea was give Ukraine a lot of money from the Russian assets and have Ukraine buy arms from South Korea. And that will keep Ukraine armed and fighting for at least another year,
Mhm.
complicating any peace initiative that Donald Trump wants to undertake. So the South Korean president showed every sign of going along with this. Last year, in 2023, he supplied 500,000 artillery shells to the United States, bypassing South Korean laws. Those shells, as we all knew, ended up in Ukraine. He seemed to be very willing to go along with it this time. There was all the talk about the North Korean soldiers in Russia, in Kursk region, supposedly there. Nobody can see them. Nobody can find any evidence that they exist. But supposedly there, that was used to justify getting the South Koreans to supply weapons to Ukraine. Except, of course, that the South Korean people were not fooled. Overwhelming opposition to this idea in South Korea. The opposition parties strongly opposed. The South Korean parliament opposed, because the South Korean opposition parties have the majority. So in order to get this thing done and declare martial law, have the parliament dissolved, and then go ahead and supply the arms to Ukraine in the way that I've just described. I personally, I mean, I don't know this, and I want to stress this
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
speculation, but I
Hmm.
think this is the most likely explanation for what happened. It's the sort of thing I can imagine this particular administration doing as their way to try to keep the Ukraine war going. By the way, before I did this program, I got a rather interesting email from someone whom I can't disclose, but
Hmm.
somebody who's very well informed. And he says that the latest plan, by the way, is to supply Ukraine with weapons from Syria. So Syria's collapsed. There's large numbers of weapons there, shells,
Hmm.
artillery pieces, armored vehicles. Uh, get a hold of as many of them as possible in the weeks available, and send them
Hmm.
to Ukraine. I mean,
Why
this
not?
is why not exactly. Yeah.
Well, I want to share with you in China. I think I haven't heard anybody in China have your theory, but there is
No.
another theory in terms of why it happened right now. Now, of course, we talk about it, his trouble, his wife's trouble,
Yeah.
all those things, but none of them is imminent, right? So why now that he
Yeah.
felt so compelled? Um, so one theory in China is that, or their rumor, I wouldn't say a theory,
Yeah.
but there are rumors saying that, again, going back to Biden administration, wanted him to start some kind of a provocation against the North Korea because of the balloon. We talked about the balloon thing, back and forth thing. Now, so far, nothing has come as really
Yeah.
serious, but it's just a balloon, kind of a more propaganda probably than anything else. But the Biden administration apparently wanted, according to this rumor, wanted South Korea to do more to provoke North Korea. And then, of course, that again, he will have to bypass the parliament if he want to do anything serious. And so again, that is a little bit similar to your theory, is that Biden want him to do something, and he felt that his hands are tied. So having the martial law, then he consolidated all the power with himself, and then he doesn't he can just do whatever the U.S. asks him to do. I think it actually reasonable to assume that's probably is what's going on, because the martial law cannot happen without the support of the military. And we all know South Korean military is not fully under the South Korean control. It's the US control the South Korean military. So if he's going to do that, at least he need to let the US know. At least the US need to support him for that, right? Isn't it?
I completely agree. Now, can I just say that's a very interesting theory, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably true. And can I
Mm-hmm.
also say that my theory and that theory complement each other? They don't
Yeah.
contradict each other. There
Yeah.
were all sorts of things that they wanted the current president to do, and which he wasn't able to do because of the constraints placed upon him by South Korean law, by South Korean public opinion, and by the
Yeah.
opposition of the parliament. So get him to declare martial law, and suddenly all sorts of things become possible. That was the plan. And I get to just go further than this. I think it's become increasingly clear, the more we learn about this coup attempt, that it wasn't the president who actually came up with the plan. Definitely he was willing to do it. He had concerns for his wife. he had all those worries, all of those things undoubtedly did play a role. But the initiative for it seems to have come from some elements within the South Korean military. Now, we haven't got the whole picture, but of course, as you absolutely rightly say, the South Korean military are very, very tied in with the US. They don't do anything without the US knowing about it in advance. And I'm sure that the US knew about what was coming. And not only because there is nothing that can happen that the South Korean military would do that the Americans don't know about previously. It's also important to say the president himself, the South Korean president, is fervently pro-American. So I mean, he would probably want to consult the US also. But one could see in the behavior of the administration, the US government, that they were far from unsympathetic to what the president was trying to do and the military officials were trying to do. They never condemned it. They never came out and spoke out against it. They never threatened the president with sanctions or the military officials with sanctions. They've sanctioned all those people in Georgia in the government and the police who are, peacefully coping with the protests there. They're happy to condemn and sanction them. But here's a president. He wants to dissolve the democratically elected parliament, arrest opposition leaders, close down newspapers. Does the United States come out and say, no, this is outrageous. This is completely wrong. You must stop doing this at once, which in South Korea would have caused the whole thing to collapse instantly? No, the United States just sits on its hands and says nothing except the fact that they back South Korea 100%, which is in their way of saying that they back what the president is doing.
Yeah. There was even a suggestion from the Hill. There was somebody suggesting that Biden and Trump should get together and arrange some kind of exile for President Yoon to come to Hawaii. They were even talking about that,
Yeah.
which tells you it's the U.S. who determines these things, right? That they are the
And not
ones
only
making.
is that it not only is it does it show you that, but it also shows that they want President Yoon out of the way so that he isn't going to be questioned and start providing difficult answers to what the Americans might feel are dangerous questions. It's a very, very interesting suggestion, and it tells you an awful lot about what's really going on. By the way, the media in Britain, to the extent that they've covered this story, have all shown extraordinary degree of sympathy for the president. I mean, mostly they're worried not about what exactly has happened, but about the direction that South Korea itself is going to take. Is it going to start becoming more pro-Chinese, as they?
Okay.